The Council began a war on humans and provoked their own extinction. The Council emergency session was chaos. Representatives shouted at each other in dozens of languages while translation systems struggled to keep up. The holographic display at the center showed the wreckage floating in the Sol system. 300 ships destroyed, the mighty dominion of scales torn apart, thousands dead. The High Coordinator's clicking grew louder and more agitated. Impossible. The humans have inferior technology. How did primitive weapons defeat our shields? A Thay scientist, its crystalline body pulsing with nervous light, provided the answer. They didn't use energy weapons. They used kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The mathematics are simple, but the execution requires perfect timing and positioning. Our shields are designed to deflect energy, not solid mass moving at 30% of light speed. Then we adjust our shields, the Krell commander said. His voice was hollow. He'd lost his entire command staff on the Dominion of Scales and barely escaped in a rescue pod. We adapt and attack again. With what? Another voice called out. It was a representative from the Drell Confederation, a species that had remained neutral. You lost your flagship and 300 vessels. The humans lost nothing. Their platforms are still active. Their fleet is intact, and they let you retreat when they could have destroyed you all. They let us retreat because they're weak, the Krell commander snarled. They lack the stomach for real war. Or they wanted you to bring back this message, the Drell representative said quietly. Before anyone could respond, every screen in the chamber changed. The Council's secure communication network, protected by encryption that had never been broken in 10,000 years, showed a human face. Dr. Minho Quan looked directly at the camera. Behind him, screens showed technical readouts and weapon specifications that made several Council representatives gasp in recognition. Greetings, Council members, Minho said in perfect galactic common. I'm sure you're wondering how we accessed your secure network. The answer is simple. We've been inside your system since the first day we joined the Council. Every communication, every military file, every secret you thought was protected. We've been watching and learning. The High Coordinator tried to cut the transmission, but nothing worked. The human signal overrode everything. You studied our culture, our art, our entertainment, Minho continued, but you dismissed our history as the barbaric past of a primitive species. That was your first mistake. We've been practicing war since we learned to sharpen stones. We've fought each other for territory, resources, ideals, and sometimes just for pride. We've destroyed civilizations and rebuilt them. We've created weapons that terrified us and then created worse ones. He leaned forward. You've lived in peace for so long that you've forgotten what war actually means. It's not just about who has bigger ships. It's about strategy, deception, sacrifice, and the will to do whatever is necessary to survive. You have the numbers. You have the technology. But we have 5,000 years of accumulated military doctrine, and we're very good at learning from our enemies. The transmission cut off, but the damage was done. Around the chamber, representatives began arguing again. Some called for immediate retaliation. Others suggested negotiation. A few, the wisest ones, proposed retreat. The High Coordinator made the decision. We mobilized the full military might of the Council. 15,000 warships. We will glass Earth and every human colony simultaneously. We will show the galaxy what happens to species that defy us. The Drell representative stood to leave. Then you've learned nothing. You're about to make your second mistake. 3 weeks later, the Council's full armada assembled in the Proxima system. Just 4 light-years from Earth. 15,000 warships representing 32 species. Antimatter weapons capable of cracking planets. Siege platforms designed to sterilize entire worlds from orbit. Admiral Heejin Park stood in the operations center deep beneath the surface of Mars. Around her, displays showed the positions of every Council ship, their weapon status, their command structures, information gathered by 53 years of careful espionage. They're preparing to jump to Earth, her tactical officer reported. Let them, Heejin said calmly. Commander Salmon, are your teams in position? Across the galaxy, Commander Salmon Lee responded from a stealth ship near the Vren homeworld. All strike teams ready, Admiral. We have eyes on 37 priority targets across 12 systems. Lieutenant Taejin status. Lieutenant Taejin Nam's voice came from another channel. He was positioned near the Council's main supply depot in the Andros system. Charges placed and ready. On your command. Heejin looked at the display showing Earth. 3 billion people lived there. millions more on Luna, Mars, and the outer colonies, all of them depending on what happened next. "The Council expects us to defend Earth," she said to her staff. "They expect a fleet engagement where their superior numbers will overwhelm us. They think like prey animals who've never known real predators, so we're going to teach them how humans hunt." She opened a channel to all human forces. "All units execute Operation Nightfall. Show them what asymmetric warfare means." The Council fleet jumped to Earth, weapons charged and ready for glorious battle. They found the human fleet waiting just 200 ships as before. The Council commander smiled. They had 75 times more ships. This would be a massacre. Then the reports started coming in. The Vren homeworld reported explosions across their communication network. The hive mind that connected their entire species began experiencing cascading failures. Chaos spreading through their collective consciousness. The Thay primary data cores, crystalline structures that stored 10,000 years of knowledge, were being corrupted by aggressive algorithms that turned their own information against them. The Krell military academies on 3 different worlds went dark as human strike teams seized control. Holding thousands of officer candidates hostage, supply depots exploded. Communication relays went offline. Automated defense systems turned on their own ships. In the Andros system, Lieutenant Tajin watched as the antimatter containment fields around the Council's largest shipyard flickered and failed. The explosion was visible from 3 star systems away. Billions of tons of antimatter reacting with matter in an instant. The shipyard, 600 partially constructed warships, and the star system's primary planet vanished in a flash of gamma radiation. "Target destroyed," Tajin reported. The Council just lost their ability to replace losses. Back at Earth, the Council fleet was in disarray. Commanders were receiving reports of catastrophe from across their territory. Species that had contributed ships to the Armada were now screaming for those ships to return home to defend against human attacks. The human fleet hadn't fired a single shot. They just waited. Captain Jiwoo opened a communication channel to the Council fleet. "Council commanders, this is Captain Jiwoo Kim of the Human Defense Forces. You came here to destroy Earth. But while you gathered your fleet and prepared your weapons, we were already inside your borders, inside your systems, inside your communications. Every world that sent ships to this armada is now under attack." He paused, letting that sink in. "We don't fight fair. We don't line up our ships and exchange fire like this is some kind of honorable duel. We strike where you're weak. We hit what you can't defend. We make you choose between attacking us and protecting your own people." A Krell commander tried to respond with threats, but Jiwoo cut him off. "Your flagship is gone. Your primary shipyard is destroyed. Your supply lines are cut. Your communications are compromised. And we're just getting started? Every hour you stay in this system, we take another piece off the board. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to turn around and go home. You're going to find your worlds in chaos and your people terrified. And you're going to realize that you didn't start a war with a primitive species. You started a war with predators who've been perfecting the art of killing for 5,000 years. The Council fleet began to break apart. Some species recalled their ships immediately. Others tried to maintain formation, but couldn't coordinate through the compromised communications network. Within hours, the Great Armada that was supposed to end humanity was retreating in disorder. Admiral Hyejin allowed herself a small smile. Phase 2 complete. Commander Soman, Lieutenant Tajin, maintain pressure on Council territory. Captain Jiwoo, prepare the fleet for pursuit operations. We're not going to give them time to recover. On a dozen worlds, human strike teams moved through the shadows. They weren't soldiers in the traditional sense. They were specialists trained in infiltration, sabotage, and psychological warfare. They destroyed military targets while carefully avoiding civilians. They broadcast messages showing the Council's plans to exterminate human children. They planted evidence of Council corruption and lies. The galaxy watched in shock as humanity, outnumbered and outgunned, took the Council apart piece by piece, not through superior firepower but through strategy, intelligence, and the ruthless application of lessons learned from thousands of years of human conflict. In the Council chambers, now mostly empty as representatives fled to protect their homeworlds, the High Coordinator stood alone. Its mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep distress. The Council began a war on humans and provoked their own extinction. The chamber was enormous, built to hold representatives from 47 different species. Some breathed oxygen, others methane. Some stood on legs, others floated in containment fields. But today all of them stared at the single human standing at the center platform. Ambassador Doyen Choi looked small compared to the massive aliens around him. The insectoid Vren clicked their mandibles in what passed for laughter among their kind. The crystalline thigh hummed with frequencies that suggested amusement. Even the normally reserved Krell showed their teeth in what humans had learned was not a smile. The Speaker of the Council, a Vren called the High Coordinator, spoke through translation devices that filled the air with sound. Human representative, you have heard our terms. Your species will surrender all military vessels to Council authority. You will submit to genetic optimization to remove your aggressive tendencies. You will accept observer status with no voting privileges. These terms are generous considering your primitive state. Doyen stood perfectly still. He had practiced this moment for weeks. Behind him, transmitted across faster-than-light communications, every human government watched. Earth held its breath. How long do we have to consider? Doyen asked. 72 hours, the High Coordinator said. After that, we will enforce compliance. Do not mistake our patience for weakness. Doyen nodded slowly. He looked around the chamber, meeting as many eyes as he could. Some species looked away. Others stared back with what he interpreted as pity. They all thought they knew how this would end. Then I will deliver Earth's answer now, Doyen said. His voice was calm, almost gentle. We respectfully decline. The chamber exploded into noise. Clicks, hums, roars, and sounds humans had no names for filled the air. The High Coordinator's translation came through clearly despite the chaos. You refuse? You understand what this means? I understand perfectly, Doyen said. You've decided we're too dangerous to exist as equals. You want to either control us or eliminate us. My people have faced extinction before. We've faced empires that thought we were lesser beings. We're still here. They aren't. The Krell military commander stood. He was 3 meters tall, covered in scales that could deflect most energy weapons. Human, your entire fleet numbers perhaps 200 ships. The Council commands 15,000. Your technology is centuries behind ours. This is not bravery. This is suicide. Doyen smiled then. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Admiral Hee-Jin Park asked me to pass along a message if you chose this path. She said you've studied our art, our music, our literature. She wishes you had studied our history instead, particularly our military history. He turned to leave, then paused. Oh, and she wanted me to mention something specific. We've been members of this council for 53 years. In that time, we've had ambassadors, merchants, scientists, and tourists on every council world. They've been watching, learning, and preparing. The 72 hours you gave us? We don't need them. We've been ready since the day we first arrived. Doyen walked out as the council erupted behind him. 3 days later, the council armada entered the Sol system. 3,000 warships, the largest fleet ever assembled. At the center flew the Krell flagship, the Dominion of Scales, a vessel so large it had its own internal gravity and ecosystem. Captain Jiwoo Kim stood on the bridge of the Horizon's Edge, a human reconnaissance vessel that looked tiny compared to the council ships. Around him, his crew worked in focused silence. They'd trained for this. Humanity had known this day might come. All platforms report ready, his tactical officer said. Stealth fields holding, added the sensor specialist. Jiwoo watched the council fleet advance. They moved in formation, confident and unhurried. They expected Earth to surrender. They expected the human fleet to scatter. They had no idea what was waiting for them. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from the Krell flagship, the communications officer said. Put it through. The Krell commander's face appeared on screen. Human vessels, you are ordered to power down weapons and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction. You have 1 minute to comply. Jiwoo looked at the timer counting down on his display. 58 seconds, 57. Send response, he said. Text only. Message reads, you should have taken the 72 hours to reconsider. 30 seconds. All ships. This is Horizon's Edge. Operation Dawnbreak is active. Execute on my mark. 20 seconds. The Council fleet continued its advance, weapons charging, confident in their overwhelming superiority. 10 seconds. Mark, Jiwoo said quietly. The outer solar system came alive with light. For 53 years, humanity had been building. While the Council had smiled at the primitive humans, human engineers had been seeding the asteroid belt, the Kuiper belt, and the Oort cloud with autonomous weapons platforms. Thousands of them, each equipped with kinetic accelerators that could launch projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. The Council's sensors lit up with warnings too late. The platforms had been in stealth mode, their power signatures masked, waiting for this exact moment. The first wave hit the Council fleet like the fist of an angry god. Kinetic rounds moving at 30% of light speed didn't need explosives. Mass and velocity did all the work. When the first projectile hit the Dominion of Scale's forward shields, the shields collapsed instantly. The second projectile punched through the hull. The third went straight through the ship from bow to stern. The massive Krell flagship broke in half, its internal atmosphere exploding into space, carrying thousands of crew members with it. More rounds followed. The weapons platforms had perfect targeting data, fed to them by the human deep space network that the Council had dismissed as primitive communication satellites. Every shot was calculated, precise, devastating. Council ships began evasive maneuvers, but they'd entered the system in tight formation, expecting an easy victory. How they crashed into each other trying to scatter. Some tried to return fire, but the human platforms were small, stealthed, and spread across billions of kilometers. Incoming fire from Council destroyers, the tactical officer reported. They're targeting the platforms. Let them waste ammunition, Jiwoo said. Launch the second wave. The human fleet, those 200 ships the Council had counted and dismissed, suddenly multiplied. What the Council hadn't known was that each human ship carried dozens of fighter craft equipped with their own weapons and shields. The fighters launched in coordinated swarms, moving in patterns that seemed chaotic but were actually precisely calculated. They'd learned this tactic from Earth's own insects, something the Council would have found ironic if they'd had time to appreciate it. Each fighter was controlled by an AI working in concert with human pilots, creating a hive mind of metal and determination. Sir, Council fleet is breaking formation, the sensor officer reported, reading multiple power losses. Their flagship is, it's gone, sir. Confirmed destruction. Jiwoo watched the displays showing the battle. 300 Council ships destroyed in the first hour. The remainder were retreating beyond Neptune's orbit, dragging their damaged vessels with them. All ships cease fire, he ordered. Let them run. Let them report what they saw here. His communications officer looked up. Sir, we're receiving a transmission from Admiral Hijin. She wants to know if we should pursue. Negative, Jiwoo said. This was just the opening move. They came here expecting to crush primitives. Instead, they found an enemy that's been preparing for war since before we could write. Tell the Admiral the Sol system is secure. Now we wait for their next move. He looked at the retreating Council fleet and felt no satisfaction, only grim determination. This wasn't a victory. This was simply humanity showing they could defend their home. The real war was about to begin, and everyone in the galaxy was about to learn a simple truth. Humans had been practicing warfare for thousands of years. The Council had forgotten what war even meant. That was going to be a fatal mistake. How? It asked the empty room. How did we lose to Primi? The Council began a war on humans and provoked their own extinction. The Thay home world of Crystallia had never known war. For 8,000 years, the crystalline beings had lived in perfect harmony. Their consciousness spread across vast networks of living crystal that sang with shared thoughts and memories. Now those crystals screamed with corrupted data and false signals. Commander Soman Lee moved through the underground chambers with her team of specialists. They wore suits that scattered sensor sweeps and made them nearly invisible to Thay detection methods. In her hand, she carried a device that looked simple, but represented decades of human cryptography research. How much longer? She whispered to her technical specialist. 2 minutes to reach the primary node, he responded. Once we're in, we can purge the corruption and restore their systems. A Thay Guardian crystallized from the wall ahead of them, its body glowing with defensive energy. Soman raised her hand, showing she was unarmed. The Guardian's translation matrix crackled to life. Why do you help us? Your species attacks our people. We attacked your military communications and defense networks, Soman said carefully. We never touched civilian infrastructure. The corruption spreading through your cities now isn't our doing. It's a cascade failure from rushed defensive protocols your government installed without proper testing. We're here to fix it before your entire planetary consciousness collapses. The Guardian hesitated, then allowed them to pass. It understood what many Council species were learning. Humans made a distinction between military targets and civilians. They fought hard and without mercy against those who threatened them. but they didn't wage war on innocent populations. 6 light-years away, Lieutenant Tajan Nam faced a different situation. The Krell Empire, proud and warlike even by human standards, had refused to acknowledge their losses. They'd gathered what remained of their fleet and prepared a revenge strike against Mars' colony. Tajan stood on the rust-colored surface of Mars, looking up at the orbital defense platforms humans had built. Unlike the Council's elegant stations, these were brutal and functional. Every surface bristled with weapons. Every angle was calculated for maximum defensive coverage. "They're coming," his sensor operator said. 300 Krell warships. ETA 2 hours. "Good," Tajan said. He opened a channel to Admiral Heejin. "Admiral, the Krell took the bait. They think Mars is vulnerable." Heejin's voice carried a grim satisfaction. "They see our smallest colony and think it's an easy target. They don't know we've been fortifying Mars for 30 years. Show them what happens when they underestimate human defensive planning." The Krell fleet arrived with weapons blazing, expecting to overwhelm the human defenders quickly. Instead, they found themselves in a killing field. The orbital platforms opened fire with coordinated precision. Ground-based artillery launched shells through carefully calculated trajectories. Fighter craft swarmed from hidden bases in the canyons. But the real surprise came when the Krell landing forces reached the surface. They found fortified positions that seemed to shift and change, tunnels that led into traps, and human defenders using tactics the Krell had never encountered. Tajan led a platoon through the underground warrens, using them exactly as they were designed. When the Krell pushed into a corridor, the humans would fall back, lure them deeper, then seal the exits and flood the passage with incapacitating gas. When the Krell tried to advance on a surface position, they'd find it abandoned, only to be hit by flanking fire from positions they'd thought were empty. One Krell commander, bigger and more decorated than the others, cornered Tajan's unit in what looked like a dead end. The commander roared something the translator rendered as, "Die with honor, human." Tajan smiled behind his helmet. "Honor is for people who can afford it. We prefer winning." The floor beneath the Krell force gave way, dropping them into a chamber that had been prepared specifically for this moment. Nets of high-tensile cable deployed, tangling the warriors. Non-lethal sonic weapons disoriented them. Within minutes, 30 Krell soldiers were captured without a single death. "We don't want to kill you," Tajan said to the captured commander. "We want you to go home and tell your empire what happened here. Tell them that humans don't just fight hard. We fight smart. Every battle, every encounter, every engagement is an opportunity to learn and adapt. That's why you can't beat us. Not because we're stronger, but because we're always learning." Back in Council space, the political structure was collapsing. The Thay Ascendancy announced their withdrawal from the war, grateful for human aid in fixing their systems, but unwilling to sacrifice more for what they now saw as the Council's foolish pride. The Drell Confederation had already declared neutrality. 3 smaller species followed. In the Council chambers, now protected by emergency force fields and paranoid security, the remaining leadership met in crisis. The High Coordinator's clicking was slow and defeated. "We have lost 50% of our military forces," it reported. "Supply lines are compromised. Communications are unreliable. 15 species have withdrawn support. The humans continue to strike at will across our territory." A Vren sub-coordinator spoke, its hive mind voice representing millions. "We must use the final option, the species killer weapon." Silence fell across the chamber. The species killer was a nano-weapon, illegal by every galactic law, capable of targeting specific genetic markers. It could wipe out an entire species while leaving others untouched. "If we use that weapon, we become what the humans claimed we are," a moderate voice argued. "We become genocidal monsters." "We already are," the Krell commander said bitterly. "We came to Earth planning to glass the planet. Billions of civilians dead. The only difference is we failed and they succeeded." The debate raged for hours. Finally, a vote was called. The decision was close, but the moderates won. The species killer would not be used, not yet. Instead, they would make one more attempt at negotiation. Ambassador Doyen received the Council's request for talks aboard his flagship, a massive Sol-class battleship called the Indomitable. The name was chosen deliberately, a message. He met the Council delegation in a conference room that was carefully designed to be comfortable for multiple species. He offered refreshments, asked after their health, and was unfailingly polite. This confused them. They'd expected threats and demands. "You wish to discuss terms?" Doyen asked. The Thay representative spoke first. Your species has made its point. You are more capable than we believed, but this war serves no one. Surely we can find a peaceful resolution. Doyen nodded slowly. Peace would be wonderful. I'd like nothing more than to go home to Earth, see my family, and never think about war again. But we tried peace. We joined your council in good faith. We followed your laws. We shared our culture. And when you decided we were too dangerous to exist as free beings, you gave us an ultimatum. Surrender or die. He leaned forward. You understand what you did, right? You didn't just threaten our military. You threatened every human man, woman, and child in the galaxy. You were going to either enslave us through genetic modification or exterminate us. We didn't start this war. We didn't want this war. But since you forced it on us, we're going to finish it. What do you want? The Krell representative asked bluntly. Complete dissolution of the Council as a governing body, Doyen said without hesitation. Every species returns to independent sovereignty. No more hierarchies based on technological advancement or age. No more ultimatums to species deemed inferior. And reparations paid to every species the Council has suppressed over the millennia. We found records, you see. Humans weren't the first you tried to control. We're just the first who successfully fought back. The Council delegates looked at each other in shock. You want to destroy the entire Council? The system that has maintained galactic peace for 10,000 years? You didn't maintain peace, Doyen said quietly. You maintained dominance. You silenced dissent and called it harmony. Well, humanity is loud and we don't silence easily. The Council dies. What comes after can be something better, something actually based on cooperation instead of coercion. The Krell representative stood angrily. And if we refuse? Doyen pulled up a holographic display. It showed human ships positioned at every Council military installation, every major shipyard, every critical infrastructure point across Council space. Then we execute Operation Checkmate. Simultaneous strikes on every Council military and governmental facility across 17 star systems. Not destruction, disablement will leave your civilians alone. We'll leave your merchant ships alone. But your ability to wage war to threaten anyone ever again ends in approximately 6 hours. That's when the operation launches unless we reach an agreement. He looked each delegate in their various types of eyes. You called us primitive. You called us aggressive. You said we were too dangerous to be free. But when you brought war to us, we fought it on our terms. And we're winning not because we're more violent, but because we're better at it. 5,000 years of practice tends to do that. You understand this will change everything? The Thay representative said. The power structure of the entire galaxy. Good, Doyen said. It needs changing. The Council had its chance to be fair and just. Instead, it became exactly what it... The Council began a war on humans and provoked their own extinction. The 6 hours passed in tense silence. Ambassador Doyen stood in the command center of the Indomitable, watching multiple displays showing human forces positioned across Council space. Every ship was ready. Every strike team was in position. Operation Checkmate was poised like a sword above the Council's neck. With 30 seconds remaining, the communication channel activated. The High Coordinator's face appeared, its mandibles moving slowly in what human xenologists had learned was resignation. The Council accepts your terms, it said. 23 species have voted to dissolve the Council and accept human mediation in creating a new galactic government. 15 species have refused and are withdrawing from Council space. 9 species abstain. Doyen let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. All human forces stand down. Operation Checkmate is cancelled. I repeat, stand down. Across 17 star systems, human ships powered down weapons but maintained positions. They'd won, but Doyen knew this was only the beginning of a much more complicated process. What about the 15 species who refused? Captain Jiwoo asked quietly. We monitor them, Doyen said. If they leave peacefully, we let them go. If they try to launch revenge strikes, we stop them. But we don't pursue. We're not conquerors. Over the next few days, the full scope of the Council's collapse became clear. The Thay Ascendancy had already begun opening diplomatic channels with Earth, offering technological exchange and mutual cooperation. The Drell Confederation proposed hosting the first assembly of what they were calling the Galactic Union. But not everyone accepted defeat gracefully. The Vren Collective, its hive mind still recovering from the chaos algorithms humans had introduced, made a desperate decision. They began forcibly integrating the populations of their allied species into their hive mind. creating soldier drones to replace their lost warriors. Commander Soman Lee was the first to discover what was happening. Her team, investigating reports of unusual activity on a Vren colony world, found processing centers where individuals were being stripped of their autonomy and merged into the collective consciousness. "This is forced assimilation," Soman reported, her voice tight with anger. "They're destroying entire cultures, turning millions of people into biological robots." Admiral Heejin's response was immediate. "All available forces converge on Vren space. We're launching rescue operations. Commander Soman, you have authorization to use whatever force necessary to shut down those processing centers." The Vren, desperate and cornered, fought back with surprising ferocity. They'd learned some things from fighting humans. They used ambush tactics. They targeted supply lines. They even attempted to infiltrate human forces with drones programmed to act independently. But they made one critical mistake. They underestimated how much humans valued individual freedom. Soman led the assault on the primary processing facility personally. Her team breached the walls using shaped charges, moved through the corridors in practiced formation, and reached the main chamber where thousands of people waited in containment fields for integration. "Get them out," Soman ordered. "All of them. We're not leaving anyone behind." The Vren Queens, 7 of them linked in a shared consciousness, sent their drones to stop the rescue. Soman's team fought through wave after wave, using non-lethal weapons when possible but switching to lethal force when necessary. "Why do you care about these beings?" the Vren Queens asked through their drones. "They are not your species. They are nothing to you." Soman shot down another drone and kept moving toward the containment fields. "That's where you're wrong. Every sapient being has the right to choose their own path. You're taking that away from them. We can't let that stand." Meanwhile, Dr. Minho Kwan and his medical team worked frantically to reverse the integration process for those who'd already been partially assimilated. It was delicate work. The Vren integration was designed to be permanent, rewriting neural patterns and creating dependencies on the hive mind. "We're losing people," one of the medical officers reported. "Their brains can't handle the separation. The integration goes too deep." Minho worked through the night trying different approaches, failing more than he succeeded. Each failure was a person who would remain part of the hive mind forever, their individuality erased. On the 3rd day, he found a technique that worked. It wasn't perfect. Those who were rescued would need years of therapy and rehabilitation, but they would be themselves again. "Send this protocol to all human medical facilities," Minho ordered. "We're going to save as many as we can." But while the humans rescued millions, the Vren made their final, desperate gamble. 3 of the 7 queens activated an ancient device that predated even the Council, a stellar cascade weapon capable of causing a chain reaction of supernovas across an entire region of space. The device was hidden in the Terminus cluster, a dangerous region of space filled with unstable stars and gravitational anomalies. The Vren believed humans wouldn't follow them there. Captain Jiwoo proved them wrong. His fleet entered the cluster despite warnings from every navigational system. The space was treacherous, filled with radiation and gravity wells that could tear ships apart. But Jiwoo had studied the region for weeks, mapping safe routes through the chaos. "We're detecting massive energy readings," his sensor officer reported. They matched the descriptions of the stellar cascade device from Council historical records. "Time to activation? Estimated 4 hours. Once active, it will trigger supernovas in 17 star systems. Billions of lives, both Vren and the species they've captured, will be destroyed." Jiwoo made his decision instantly. "All ships converge on those coordinates. We're shutting that device down even if we have to fly into the star itself to do it." Ambassador Doyun, coordinating from Earth, opened a direct channel to the Vren Queens. "You don't have to do this. Surrender now and we'll work out terms. We don't want to destroy you. We never wanted that." The response came from all 7 queens speaking in unison. "You broke our perfect unity. You showed our drones that individual choice is possible. You destroyed the peace we created. If we cannot have our perfect order, then we will end in glorious fire." "That's not glory," Doyun said. "That's genocide. You're going to kill billions of your own people out of spite. They are not people. They are extensions of our will. The collective is all that matters." Doyun closed his eyes in frustration. This was the problem with species who'd lived so long in peace. Some of them had forgotten that other perspectives existed. The Vren couldn't conceive that their forced unity was wrong because they'd done it for so long. Captain Jiwoo, you're authorized to use any force necessary to stop that device, Doyen said heavily. I'll take responsibility for the consequences. Jiwoo's fleet raced against time. The device was massive, built into an artificial moon orbiting a dying star. It pulsed with energy that warped space around it. We need Dr. Minho, Jiwoo said suddenly. If anyone can shut this down without triggering it, it's him. Minho was pulled from his medical work and rushed to the cluster. He arrived with 3 hours left on the countdown. What he found horrified him. This device isn't just a weapon, he reported. It's powered by living Vren queens. They've integrated themselves into it. Shutting it down means killing them. The ethical implications froze everyone. They were fighting to preserve life, to protect the innocent. But to save billions, they might have to kill the queens who'd integrated with the device. How many queens? Jiwoo asked. 3. They're the ones who activated it. The other 4 queens are separate. They're trying to stop it too. A civil war was happening within the Vren collective. The species was literally tearing itself apart. Can we separate them from the device? Doyen asked. Not in 3 hours. Maybe not ever. They've merged with it completely. Their consciousness is now part of the weapon. The decision fell to Doyen as it always did. The responsibility of choosing who lived and who died. He thought about Commander Soman, still fighting to rescue individuals from forced assimilation. He thought about the billions of people, Vren and others, who would die if the cascade activated. Jiwoo, Minho, I need absolute honesty. Is there any way to save those 3 queens and stop the device? Silence stretched across the light years. No, Minho finally said. The integration is too complete. We either destroy them or accept that billions die. Doyen made the hardest decision of his life. Destroy the device. Do it now. Jiwoo's fleet opened fire. The targeting was precise, calculated to destroy the power systems without triggering a premature cascade. The 3 queens died instantly. Their consciousness integrated so deeply with the device that there was no way to know where they ended and it began. The device powered down with seconds to spare. The cascade was prevented. Billions of lives were saved, but the cost was heavy. Commander Somin stood in the processing facility she'd liberated, looking at the thousands of people her team had saved. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt tired. We killed 3 queens to save these people, her second-in-command said. Was it worth it? I don't know, Somin admitted. Ask me in 10 years when these people have rebuilt their lives. Ask them if they're glad they survived. The math says yes, 3 lives for billions is a bargain. But math doesn't capture what it feels like to make that choice. Lieutenant Taejin, still on the council, began a war on humans and provoked their own extinction. 5 years had passed since the council's dissolution. The galaxy looked different now. Where once there had been a strict hierarchy with the council at the top and humanity at the bottom, now there was a loose federation of independent species working together by choice rather than compulsion. Ambassador Doyen Choi, now gray-haired and weathered by the years of conflict and negotiation, stood before the first assembly of the Galactic Union. Representatives from 41 species filled the chamber. Some were former council members. Some had been neutral during the war. A few were species that had been suppressed by the council and were now free to join galactic society. We gather today not as conquerors and conquered, Doyen began, but as equals who've learned hard lessons about the cost of arrogance and the value of mutual respect. The Thai representative, its crystalline body reflecting light and patterns that conveyed approval, spoke next. The humans taught us that peace maintained through dominance is not true peace. It is merely the silence of the oppressed. The Krell ambassador, a scarred veteran who'd fought at Mars, added his voice. We came to Earth expecting easy victory. We found worthy opponents who fought with skill we had forgotten existed. More importantly, we found enemies who became allies once the fighting stopped. This is the mark of true strength. But not everyone was present. The Vren collective, now split into 4 separate groups, had sent only observers. The species was still healing from its civil war. 7 queens had become 4, each leading their own faction, trying to find a new way forward after millennia of forced unity. Dr. Minho Kwan, his medical expertise now focused on helping species recover from the war's trauma, worked in a rehabilitation center on a neutral world. Before him sat a former Vren drone, a being who'd been freed from the collective consciousness. How do you feel? Minho asked. The former drone, struggling with pronouns and individual identity after a lifetime as part of a greater whole, hesitated. Empty, full, confused, scared, happy, sad all at once. Is this normal? For someone learning to be an individual for the first time? Yes, completely normal, Minho said gently. You're experiencing emotions without the collective filtering them. It's overwhelming at first. The queens say we are broken. That individuality is a disease you humans infected us with. Minho shook his head. Individuality isn't a disease. It's a choice. The queens are angry because they lost control, but that control was never truly theirs to claim. You're not broken. You're becoming yourself for the first time. Across the galaxy, Commander Soman Lee stood in a cemetery on Earth. Row after row of markers stretched before her, each one representing someone who died in the war. She stopped at one marker in particular, running her fingers over the engraved name. Lieutenant Taijin Nam, killed in action defending a civilian transport from a Krell revenge strike 2 years ago. He'd evacuated the civilians first, staying behind to hold off the attackers until help arrived. Help came too late. You always said the hard part wasn't fighting, Soman whispered to the marker. You said the hard part was knowing when to stop, when to show mercy, when to be human instead of just being a soldier. I'm trying. It's harder than I thought. She placed a flower genetically engineered to survive in any environment at the base of the marker. It would bloom for decades, a small symbol of memory in a galaxy trying to forget the pain of war. Captain Ji-Woo Kim, now Admiral Ji-Woo Kim, commanded the human defense fleet from a new flagship. The Indomitable had been retired to a museum, a reminder of what had been necessary but also what they hoped never to need again. His current mission was different from anything he'd done during the war. He was escorting Vren refugee ships to a new colony world, protecting them from the few remaining extremists who believed the only good Vren was a dead Vren. Sir, we're detecting weapons signatures ahead, his tactical officer reported. 3 ships, probably pirates taking advantage of the chaos. Hail them, Ji-Woo ordered. Inform them these refugees are under human protection. The pirate ships powered down their weapons without a fight. The reputation humans had built during the war served a new purpose now. They were known as fierce fighters, yes, but also as protectors who meant what they said. One of the Vren queens sent him a message afterward. Why do you protect us? Your people died because of our actions. Because that's what it means to be human, Ji-Woo replied. We remember the past, but we don't let it poison the future. You were our enemies. Now you're people who need help. The war is over. Time to act like it. Admiral Heejin Park had retired from active service, but her work continued. She taught at the new Galactic Military Academy, where officers from dozens of species learned not just tactics and strategy, but also ethics and the laws of war. In her classroom, students from former enemy species sat side by side with humans, learning from someone who'd orchestrated their defeat. War, she told her students, is humanity's oldest tradition and our greatest shame. We've practiced it for 5,000 years. We're very, very good at it. But the measure of a civilization isn't how well they wage war. It's whether they have the wisdom to avoid it and the strength to end it with mercy when it can't be avoided. A Krell student raised a clawed hand. Admiral, during the war humans had the opportunity to exterminate the Council species completely. You had the weapons and the advantage. Why didn't you? Hyejin smiled sadly. Because we remembered what it felt like to be on the other side. Humans have faced extinction many times in our history. We've been conquered, enslaved, and nearly wiped out by disease, disaster, and our own stupidity. We knew what you were feeling because we'd felt it ourselves. And we decided that just because we could destroy you didn't mean we should. She pulled up a holographic display showing casualty figures from the war. Millions dead on both sides. Entire fleets destroyed. Worlds scarred by battle. Every name on this list represents someone who won't go home. Someone who won't see their family again. Someone whose potential was cut short by violence. We won the war, yes, but we lost too. Everyone did. That's why we teach this class, so the next generation might be wise enough to avoid what we couldn't. On Earth, in a small town far from any military installation, a reunion was taking place. Veterans from different species gathered not to refight old battles, but to remember and to heal together. A former Krell warrior stood beside a human marine who'd fought at Mars. They compared scars and told stories, finding common ground in shared trauma. A Thay observer watched in fascination, documenting how former enemies could become friends. We tried to kill each other, the Krell warrior said, clicking his jaws in what humans had learned was laughter. Now we drink together and complain about our commanders. The commanders were trying to kill us too, the human marine joked. Just through stupidity instead of weapons. They laughed. But underneath the humor was something deeper. Understanding. Recognition that they'd all been tools of powers beyond their control. Soldiers following orders. Survivors trying to make sense of what they'd experienced. Ambassador Doyen watched recordings of these gatherings with mixed emotions. Pride at what humanity had achieved, sorrow for the cost, hope for the future, and always the weight of the decisions he'd made. His assistant entered with news. Ambassador, we've received a message from the Terminus cluster. The species that fled during the war are requesting permission to return to known space. What's changed? Doyen asked. They say they've encountered something out there. Something that makes them prefer human protection to whatever is in the dark between the stars. Doyen felt a chill. The galaxy was vast and humanity's knowledge of it was still limited. What could possibly scare species who'd been willing to flee into the unknown rather than accept human terms? Send a response. Tell them they can return, but they follow Galactic Union laws. No more hierarchies, no more forced compliance. Everyone is equal or no one is. He looked out at the stars, wondering what was out there beyond the edge of mapped space. The war with the Council had revealed humanity's capacity for violence and mercy in equal measure. But there were older things in the galaxy, things that predated even the Council. On a medical station, Dr. Minho received an unusual patient. A member of one of the species that had fled, now returning sick and frightened. As Minho examined them, he found something that shouldn't exist. Cellular corruption that looked almost like a disease but followed patterns that suggested intelligence. Where did you encounter this? Minho asked. Beyond the rim, the patient whispered. There are things out there. Old things. Hungry things. They saw us and they followed. We ran, but I don't think we can run far enough. Minho sent an immediate report to Admiral Hyejin. Within hours, every military installation in the galaxy was on alert. Human deep space reconnaissance vessels deployed to the galactic rim, searching for whatever had frightened the refugees. Captain Jiwoo commanded one of these missions. His fleet moved slowly through the dark between stars, sensors straining to detect any anomaly. For 3 weeks they found nothing. Then, on a routine scan of an empty system, they detected something impossible. A ship, but not a ship like anything in the know.